Hello. Well, I hope you're enjoying reading Muir's book. It's actually really interesting when you think about it in terms of developing policies. But work on this because we have several more chapters to do. Chapter 3 today, a solution for improving criminal justice policy. The focus of our textbook is that the evaluation research will help make criminal justice policies more accountable and effective. An evaluation research framework as a part of policy-making efforts can ensure that, number one, the need for policies is clearly identified. Number two, policies rest on a solid theoretical foundation. Number three, are implemented well. Number four, are effective. And number five, achieve their goals in a cost-efficient manner. Now, you'll see all of this on page 35, so hopefully you'll enjoy reading that, thinking a little bit more deeply about it. These 5 dimensions constitute the cornerstone of the evaluation hierarchy. Chapter 3 describes the history of evaluation research. In this chapter, the author describes each type of evaluation and the logic of the hierarchy. And you'll see that as you look at the figure that lays out those different steps. It was not until the 1930s that the research activity of this nature was actually initiated. By the 1950s, program evaluation was a commonplace. Mears uses a quote from Peter Rossi in 2004 to define policy evaluation as the use of social research methods to systematically investigate the effectiveness of social intervention programs and in ways that are adapted to their political and organizational environments and are designed to inform social action to improve social condition. Now, that's really a relatively long definition given by Rossi, but it's on page 36, so go back and look at that, think a little bit about it. Mears goes on to say that evaluation research aims to produce empirically based evidence about policies, not anecdotal accounts that confirm opinions about them. So again, based on empirical evidence. Mears applies an evaluation process approach to criminal justice policy with the following goals in mind. 1, shows how evaluation research can be used to improve criminal justice policy. Number 2, present the argument that many criminal justice policies lack a solid evidence-based foundation. 3, evaluation should be integrated into criminal justice policy development as to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of the criminal justice system. Now, we mentioned this before when we were looking at chapters 1 and 2, because again, Mears is going to be very critical of the fact that there is probably very little theoretical foundation for many of our present-day criminal justice policies. Okay? On page 37, Mears elaborates a little bit more on the evaluation hierarchy. He states that it's a hierarchy because in a hierarchy, one level builds on a prior level. Consider the first level of the evaluation hierarchy, a needs evaluation. The basic idea is that there is a need for social policy, and it should be established before the policy actually takes place or takes shape. Policy should be justified on the basis of some assessment of needs, and of course you'll see that on page 37. A theory evaluation provides guidance about such possibilities. Theory evaluation helps to ensure that a sensible causal logic exists for tracking a problem. Once a solution or condition is identified, and probably I should say once a situation, sorry about that. Once a situation or condition is identified and there's a need for any policy intervention, a credible theory for intervention exists, then the third level of the evaluation hierarchy becomes appropriate. Again, you'll see this figure in chapter 2, I do believe, and so you'll be able to see how the steps are outlined there. In implementation evaluation, sometimes referred to as a process evaluation on page 39, that also exists, and we'll spend a whole chapter on that implementation evaluation. Well, let me also say that the implementation evaluation is conducted because we want to know if the policy has actually been implemented as designed. Mears uses a drug court as an example, and he says in order to determine the effectiveness of a drug court policy or program, we actually need to know if participants are receiving treatment. He goes further to state that implementation evaluations are useful for several reasons. And so some of those reasons are, number 1, they provide critical information about the level and quality of policy implementation. Number 2, assess whether a policy achieves its intended objectives. Number 3, provide information that helps us to interpret why impact evaluation may identify less than expected results. After we've determined a need for a policy, created or established a theoretical foundation or design that is associated with the condition for which a policy is being considered, and after services associated with the implementation of the policy have been done, then the next step consists of conducting an outcome or an impact evaluation. Now, keep in mind what I'm doing here is actually talking about the different steps that you will see in the first figure, and that outlines each one of those, and that's what I've really just talked about, just kind of giving you a brief idea of it. A main goal of the impact evaluation is through empirical research to identify the change in outcomes because of the institutionalization of a policy. Mears says that impact evaluation not only measures policy outcomes, but also claims to assess whether the policy is the cause of any change in the outcome. When we have a policy, we really want to see what is the outcome. And so it's important that we can do an implementation evaluation to see if that is the case. As identified early in the last stage of the evaluation hierarchy is the cost efficiency evaluation. Policymakers and the public clearly have a vested interest in knowing what is in the bang, or in knowing what is the bang for the buck. In other words, they want to know, are we getting our money's worth? That's exactly what most of the public and especially the policymakers are concerned about. These programs, do they pay off? Do they really benefit from having them? Okay? Mears' position is that evaluation increases accountability and evidence-based policy. He says that it seems sensible that we would want social policies grounded in knowledge or evidence about what works best. In Chapter 3, Mears addresses evaluation research versus performance monitoring. Performance monitoring involves the ongoing analysis of the process and outcome. Some benefits from conducting evaluation research centers around improving criminal justice policies directly and indirectly. So what we've done is in Chapter 3, we've kind of covered the whole hierarchy. And so eventually what we'll do is see now each one of those hierarchies in a chapter. In Chapter 4, we're going to talk about needs evaluation. Again, keep in mind, we're moving through each hierarchy that the author has in that Chapter 2. Okay? Needs evaluations help to identify whether a problem exists. Chapter 4 lays out the process and the steps involved in determining whether a problem exists and whether a policy ought to follow. A needs evaluation constitutes the first step in the evaluation hierarchy. Without an established need, without a clear evidence of a problem, why proceed to develop and implement a policy? An effective response to a problem requires first identifying the specific problem. And so this is what we're going to see. These are the steps that we move through. Criminal justice administrators usually lack LACK training in evaluation research, or they're not that sensitized to the importance of assessing the wide range of potential problems within their purview. Evaluating whether a problem exists entails a number of conditions. Mears lists those for us to follow, and they are in this manner. Number 1, number matter. In other words, the size of the problem or the condition. A big problem calls for more attention. Number 2, absolute and relative changes in the magnitude of a problem are important. Number 3, knowing something about the distribution of a problem is also very helpful in deciding to implement a policy. Again, you'll see all of these outlined in this chapter. Mears suggests that we can also begin from the opposite direction. On page 60, he says in the textbook, he states that we can begin with an existing policy or proposed policy, and we can work to determine if this specific policy is needed or will work on a particular need. In other words, you determine whether a particular policy is warranted. Now, some of you may remember something about grounded theory, and this is probably exactly like that, is that our research begins not necessarily with a theory, but with a problem, and then we take the problem and identify and connect it to a theory. And so this is really the idea here, I think, that Mears is suggesting. Okay? But anyway, hold on to that. We'll move through that a little bit later on. Mears suggests that there are three questions to ask when examining a need for an existing or proposed policy. First, are existing efforts insufficient to address some social problem? You have to determine if all existing policies fall short. Second, he says, are existing efforts to address some social problem not only insufficient, but also not amenable to correction? Third, in comparison to existing efforts to respond, is a proposed or newly implemented policy a needed substitute or supplement? Mears reminds us that need evaluation and theory evaluations are intertwined. He states, a well-conducted evaluation of the need for a particular policy typically will require delving into the theoretical logic and evidence for the policy. And he says that on page 61, so you want to look at that, think a little bit about that more closely. In this chapter, he goes back and forth discussing the ability to conduct a need evaluation aimed at determining if a social problem exists and determining whether an exist policy will take care of a social problem identified as existing. So in this chapter exists a section on how to conduct a need evaluation. Mears states that the first thing is to conceptualize or aim to describe the possible social problem. He says that the second step is to develop some type of quantitative estimate of the problem. You need to have some hard evidence, some fact that a condition exists and that it is a problem to society, even which segment of society, whether a large portion or only a small mass of people. He says that there is no single approach to quantifying a problem. Usually, one may begin to collect interviews, conduct research, find focus groups, use any method that will allow you to see or witness there is a problem, a condition that warrants some fixing. Once this information is gathered, it will help you as you move forward to formulate a policy. Mears says that to develop an effective policy response, a need evaluation also will want to describe the current effects. Well, it's really not effects, it's efforts, sorry about that, okay, to address the problem and the causes of it. So that's on page 67. Another section within this chapter deals with why or need evaluation is important. Within this section, Mears identifies 7 explanations, and they're all outlined beginning on page 67. One, he says, perhaps the most important, they help us to identify whether a problem exists and the scope and nature of the problem. Number 2, provide guidance about whether a policy should be retained. Again, keep in mind that this is why, or what's the importance of having a need evaluation done. 3, provide guidance about the type of policy response that should be considered. Number 4, can aid in efforts to provide or to prioritize the problems that merit attention. 5, can highlight research gaps that ideally would be addressed before implementing the policy. Number 6, can highlight the dimensions that should be used to assess a policy's effectiveness. And number 7, a more generalized benefit is that they can help clarify policy discussions and debates. So again, that's 7. They're outlined page 67 or so, and you'll see that he has more elaboration on those when you begin to read that chapter. Well, enjoy this chapter, for there is a wealth of information within it. The idea, the IDEAL, situation is that needs evaluations occur prior to implementation of any policy.